Let's go ahead and talk about some of the adjustment setup. So there are some parameters that are available to define how and when and what happens when you adjust. So basically, the first set of parameters that we're looking at here for the first bullet is the allow adjustment statuses. There's just different statuses that transactions can be in. And basically, there's quite a few toggles, and you can say whether you allow adjustments in specific statuses, such as invoicing, or if a transaction's been posted or estimated, or on an invoice proposal, etc. We'll take a look at that in the application here shortly. Then the second parameter is we'll always create adjustment transactions. So no matter what you're adjusting, you can force the system to create a adjustment transaction. So there's just a toggle that's either a yes or no value. And if you want that behavior, you can set it to yes. And then auto update field is the third bullet there. And basically with the auto update field, you're just defining if you're going to update, for instance, a category and you have a different cost and sales price associated with that category, do you want to update those values? And if you toggle that field to yes, then it will try and auto update any values where applicable. And then the final bullet is use adjustment date as the new project date. So when we were originally adjusting transactions in the previous lesson, the adjustment date wasn't being used because there's an actual parameter that you have to define as a yes value in order to make that adjustment date the new project date, meaning the posting date for your adjustment transaction. And then finally, there's this table. This table's out on TechNet. If you want to search on adjustments or project adjustments, you'll run into it. And this really tells you what happens when you make adjustments. So it doesn't matter whether you have the always create adjustment transaction checkbox toggled to yes or no. Sometimes the adjustment transaction is just forced, and this is just a graphic that represents what happens when you adjust specific things. So you can see for the first three, project number, category, and quantity, if you change those on any transaction, a new transaction is always forced. And I mean, just think about a project number. If you try and book a transaction or adjust a transaction to a new project, there could be potentially different accounting. So you'd have to back out the old ledger impact and affect the new ledger accounts. So it's just required to have a new transaction created systematically, whether your parameters want you to or not. And then you can see there's the other ones where there's conditional conditions, whether it creates a transaction or not, such as if you adjust the currency, basically if you accrued any revenue that exists on the transaction, then there's going to be an adjustment transactions. If not, if it's just a cost only transaction, it's always going to be going in your primary currency anyways, so it doesn't matter and it doesn't adjust anything. And then you can see at the bottom, then we have ones that never are adjusted, such as activity tax group, transaction tax, and item tax group. Just updates the record accordingly. Okay, so let's jump into the system and we'll take a look at setting some of these parameters and walking through some of that setup. Right, so we're going to go through and take a look at the different parameters that you can define around adjustments. So under project management and accounting, we'll go to setup and then the project management and accounting parameters. And basically what you can define here fall right on the general tab, so your first tab. And this is where you can see what we've previously talked about, allow adjustment of transaction status. So basically whichever ones that you have toggled to yes or no, in those statuses you can adjust those transactions. So yeah, you can define these as you want. System should handle accordingly when you do the adjustments, no matter what status they're in. Yeah, so you can toggle those on. So right now in my system, I allow adjustments when a transaction's been posted, if it's on an invoice proposal, and if it's been estimated. If transaction's been invoiced or eliminated, we do not allow any sort of adjustment with those. Then we have the next three as well. So basically, here's the three toggles. Always create adjustment transactions. So basically that's defining, doesn't matter what you're adjusting, it's always going to do basically a back in and then an out transaction to create the adjustment. So As you saw earlier, we had an example where we had an out and an in when we adjusted. So we'll just create those all the time. And then we have the auto update field. So this is set to no in the Contoso demo data set. But if you flip that to yes, it'll try and update any field applicable when you update or adjust any field on a transaction. And then use adjustment date as a new project date. So this is what I had toggled to no, and that's why my adjustment date wasn't being used on my adjusting transactions. But I'll toggle that to yes, and I'll leave this as no, and auto update field. That sure we'll define that as yes. So that's some of the primary setup around the adjustment functionality. We won't go in and demonstrate any of that right now. What I want to show you too is if we get into auditing, like basically if you want to understand the adjustment transactions or a transaction that's been adjusted, what exactly has happened, there's actually an inquiry where you can take a look at some of that stuff. So basically under project management and accounting, inquiries and reports, under transaction inquiries, all these different transaction inquiries have what we call the adjustment inquiry on it. So if you go, let's just look at hours. And I'm going to filter this. This is going to bring up all your transactions for any hours that have ever been in the system. So basically, let's filter on project date, and we'll say between 3/15/2016 to 3/25/2016. So 10-day window. Let's see if what we have. There we go. And basically, if any transaction in here has a what we call an adjustment reference ID, basically this adjustment trace option here will be active. So I believe I have some in here. There we go. This one right here, the bottom one. So you can hit the adjustment trace inquiry now, and then it's going to pull up an adjustment view. It's going to show you exactly what's going on. If you want to adjust this a little different, here's some more setup. So you can add what fields you want to see and all that type of information too. So whatever you throw onto the right column here or the right pane and hit OK will be added to the adjustment trace setup. And then you also have the go to transaction link where it'll bring you right into that transaction. So since we have a few seconds here, let's go ahead and we'll just run an adjustment now that we adjusted our parameter to use the adjustment date as the new project date. So we'll go throw a transaction on a project and see how that reacts. So what we expect here is the date to be adjusted based on what we define. So I will jump in and just look at my posted transactions. And I have some design work here, and let's just adjust this. And this one we'll set to 325. Hit OK. And let's adjust the category to something else. Consulting. And we'll hit OK. There we go. And then we'll post. So first of all, the thing that you should note is this date right here is different than the project date up top. So 322 versus 325. And the thing to note about project date versus the ledger date, in this example, they're going to be the same, but typically the project date is the sub-ledger date, while the ledger date is what's going to affect the general ledger. And if you don't see both values on a transaction, that means that they're the same. So in our case, the ledger date and the project date is going to be 325, so I'll just post that. And now that's posted. And if we go back to our all projects and refresh this, there we go. We can see that it got backed out, and now we have the appropriate dates on both the adjusting entry, or I guess the reversal entry, and then the adjustment entry. So it used our parameter appropriately. Okay, so that's what I had to show you about the adjustment setup. Just note that those parameters are there. You have that inquiry where you can take a look at the history of your adjustments and configure that a little bit. But other than that, that's about it. Thank you.